I can't honestly tell you that I loved either of these books. Both very different, but they both exemplify their kind of style of pacing. I am much more character driven. How, as writers, we can control the rhythm of our stories. He quite lazily, I think, just basically chucks it into dialogue. Noticed how there are some books that you literally cannot stop reading, you just can't put them down, and then there are other books that you kind of savor a little bit more slowly and kind of just mull. I recently read two very different books. I read The Hallmarked Man by Robert Galbraith and The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown, with a view to studying pacing specifically. I wanted to complete opposites, to look at how I might work out how I want to pace my current work in progress, which is a speculative archaeological thriller. The Secret of Secrets is classic Dan Brown. It's all sort of this kind of cinematic, adrenaline, high speed, kind of chase, bang, bang, bang kind of speed. So breakneck pacing, essentially. And The Hallmarked Man, which is very classic of Robert Galbraith stories. It's much slower, it's very layered, it's very sort of meticulously plotted, but slow moving, and things unfold more organically. It's a much more character driven mystery, essentially. Obviously they are also different genres, both very different, but they both exemplify their kind of style of pacing. And so stick around, because at the end of the video I've collated a kind of cheat sheet of both styles and the features of both, so it helps me kind of work through what I want to do, if I want to speed up or slow down, and maybe it will help you too. So let's jump in. Why did I choose these two books? I think everybody knows Dan Brown's kind of speed and style. You've got very short chapters, high stakes. You've got a sense that the clock is ticking, 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 rushing through. It's very fast moving. On the other hand, Secret of Secrets, very Robert Galbraith. You've got slower, layered complexity, gentle unfolding, lots more character insights and interiority, I guess. And you've got a sort of gradual build and unfold of suspense rather than hammering an accelerator. You've got sort of a more gentle progress. It's immersive, but in a completely different way to the Dan Brown. By studying both, I wanted to get a sense of how the different styles of pacing affect the reading experience, affect my engagement as a reader, affect how I might want to make things work in my work in progress, and how, as writers, we can control the rhythm of our stories. So I've got my little cliff notes here of what I learned from each of them. So the first takeaway for me that really stuck out was structuring the story and how that affects the pacing. So you've got Dan Brown and you've got his super short chapters, you've got cliffhangers at the end of literally every chapter, and his scenes are very blockbuster, kind of super visual, basically. They're highly visual. It's like a movie storyboard. And then you've got his plot beats, which are really predictable but really exciting. Tension is high, stakes are always pretty high. And then when you think it can't ratchet up anymore, it does. So I think from here you can see that his structure is creating this really forceful drive forward, and this momentum that is basically unstoppable. The Galbraith style, in complete contrast, you've got the much longer chapters, and obviously that gives you a lot more room for introspection, for the investigation, which is part of the mystery story, but just this kind of much gentler and sort of deeper feeling, organic unfolding. You've got a slower build of tension. The suspense is much more sort of cumulative and gradually built. It's not this kind of immediate sense of everything happening at once. And I think that kind of really showed me that slowing down lets readers feel the weight of the story and spend a little bit more time in the heads of the characters. I think while we're talking about structure here, the structure lends itself to very two-dimensional characters in the Dan Brown. They don't feel characterized at all. Like the most you kind of think about Robert Langdon for depth is like what his historical fear of crowded spaces because of small spaces, because he once like fell down a well and he wears a Mickey Mouse watch. Like that's literally about as much characterization as you get that goes away from like this cliche stock figure, whereas the characters in Robert Galbraith have a really kind of rich inner life. You get a lot of understanding about them and their motives and their past and their history, but also just the depiction of the way that they work. And that's because I think the structure allows for it. The ruthlessness of that Dan Brown pacing, of those short chapters, of ending on a cliffhanger. He can't be spending time dwelling on expanding on those characters, whereas Galbraith has so much room to do that. And so it really made me think, because obviously mine in genre is closer to the Dan Brown, so I need to do some control in terms of how I work the suspense and the speed and the pacing, and the stakes are sort of often higher like that. So there's like a dynamism about the Dan Brown pacing that I do want to mimic, but equally I am much more character driven. I can't, and I don't want it at this full throttle all the time. And so it's been a really interesting lesson about how to use structure to do that. The second takeaway for me was the scene level pacing work that both authors do. So with Dan Brown, I've written, you've got action, discovery, and chase scenes dominate. I mean, what more is there to say on that? You've got sort of info dumping via dialogue. So he tries to make the characters give the history of, I don't want to give any spoilers, but in terms of like the supposed neuroscience and like quantum physics to it, they kind of explain. So with Dan Brown, the exposition and sort of info dumping that you do get comes from the mouths of the characters, and he quite lazily, I think, just basically chucks it into dialogue. And I get that. I think the detail from the narrator obviously has to be minimal to keep this kind of cinematic blockbuster feel and to keep things moving forward at a breakneck pace. With Galbraith, you've got a lot sort of slower moving scenes. You've got a lot more sort of gentle character interaction. You've got their inner thoughts. You've got detailed observation. You've got much lower stakes often, or, I mean, sometimes higher stakes, but generally across the space of the novel, there are a lot more lower stakes, slow moving scenes and much slower moving dialogue, which allows a much kind of like a subtler and slower tension to build gradually, rather than this like being hit with like this ton of bricks of high stakes. And so from that, I've basically taken that fast pacing is plot and action, and slow pacing is more character and atmosphere led. So my big takeaway from this for how I want to work my work in progress is to select my scene type very carefully for what I want to convey in that scene, and to perhaps alternate or, you know, move between the different styles accordingly. So too many fast scenes are what creates this like breakneck pacing, and can also be a little bit exhausting and not leave room for that character development that I want. But equally, too many slow moving scenes, it can be a little bit boring and a little bit like, when are we going to get to the point? Like, I'm not going to lie, I think this moved too slowly for me, and I also wanted to get to the crux of what was going to happen in terms of the relationship between the two characters, and I lost interest in the mystery plot a little bit because it was unfolding too slowly. So it's about the balance, and I think at scene level, working between sort of different types and pressing the accelerator differently in different scenes would kind of balance that better for me. So the third big difference in terms of pacing was the language and sentence level, essentially. So you've got Dan Brown with short, punchy sentences, and you've got paragraphs that are literally like a couple of lines, like I've written here, rarely exceed 3 to 4 lines. You've got frequent transitions, so like he ran, the door slammed, she looked behind her, like you've got this like flitting. Whereas with Galbraith, you've got these longer sentences, more description, you've got much more layered dialogue, you've got paragraphs that often then like shift and expand into internal monologue, character reflections, interiority. And I think the rhythm of those sentences really gives you like this feel of how the flow of the story is. Does it feel fast? Does it feel slow? And those two different types of sentences like really highlight that contrast for me. The fourth kind of lesson for me in this was basically reader engagement techniques. So with Dan Brown, you've got his famous cliffhangers, you've got this very constant motion, you've also got puzzles, and you've got ticking clocks. And all of that is kind of relentlessly happening at once very quickly. With Galbraith, you've got layered mysteries, you've got character depth, and you've got these slow kind of bit by bit revelations. This kind of showed me that pacing actually isn't solely about speed. You've got this kind of, I guess, these other controls over tension, and I haven't figured out how I'm going to make this work fully in my work in progress, but it was definitely a useful observation for me, I think, and I need to spend a bit of time working out how that sits with some of the conventions of my genre, but also my interest in my characters and wanting more of their interiority to come into play. So I hope some of those were useful. So for me, I feel like this can be distilled into 4 key takeaways. And the first one is that the structure defines the overall momentum. The second one is that the scene composition dictates that kind of immediate feeling of tension. The third is that at the sentence and language level, those choices control the reading speed, and so the real kind of flow and direct kind of experience for the reader. And the fourth is that engagement for me comes from that balance of suspense and release, and that can be done in very different ways, and both create very different effects and experiences for me as a reader. I really enjoyed this little experiment and kind of deep dive into pacing, and what I really want to do is to do it for one of my favorite novels, which is much less bound by the conventions of genre, which is Donna Tartt's The Secret History. You'll already know that if you've seen my previous videos. I would like to kind of examine it at a sort of larger plot structure, but then scene by scene and line by line and language level. I would love to know your thoughts on pacing and what you kind of love, what you don't like. These two aren't necessarily my genres. I can't honestly tell you that I loved either of these books, but the reason I chose them is I think they really exemplify the 2 different styles of pacing for their genre, and they definitely gave me enough of a sharp contrast that I've got some real takeaways from my own writing. So I hope you found this useful. I am excited to dive into my to be read pile. I hope you're having a lovely week. See you in the next video.